Now we will look at interference between first and second language. Now, one of the most important aspects of human development is language acquisition. First language has an effect on the second language acquisition, and it is claimed that first language can interfere with the acquisition of second language. Now, this is very interesting, and we have different processes as observed in children as well as adults. Now, looking at the children, we see that there are certain linguistic and cognitive processes that children acquire in the first language, and they are quite similar to that of when it comes to the acquisition of second language. So we see it says certain linguistic features, or you can say the cognitive features, they both are present in the first as well as in the second language. Now, adult appears to operate from more solid foundation of the first language and therefore manifest more interference. It has also been seen that adults too manifest errors, but unlike some of the errors children have. Then we see that the first language, however, may be readily used to bridge the gap that the adult learner cannot fill by generalization in second language. So if we look at this, it seems that in this particular case, the first language seems to facilitate, rather play a role of or create interference. We have seen that interference is in this situation sometimes pretty natural because languages have different linguistic structures or grammatical structures. For example, in the case of Urdu, you would see that in Urdu, the sentence follows subject, object, verb, and then in English, you have subject, verb, object order. Also, the sound system, it also varies language to language, and sometimes the sound system of one's first language or mother tongue does interfere in the learning of the sound system of the second language. So interference is there. Now we have to look at some of the work, or you can say the researches that have been done to look at the interference, that how it actually affects one's second language acquisition process. So the first point, as we have right in front of us, is that learner of second language tend to rely on their first language structure. The only way a learner can start to communicate in a second language is the time a learner begins to assume word for word translation, equivalence, or it is thought that every first language word has one translation in second language by the learner. So when learners of second language want to write or speak in the target language, they tend to rely basically on the first language structure because they are thinking in terms of the translation. If the structures are different, then a lot of errors occur in first language. Thus, this indicates an interference of first language on second language. Then you have developmental errors. Among them, developmental errors are the errors that are not related to learner's first language. Ambiguous errors, the errors that involve interference, and developmental errors. Then you have unique errors, those errors which cannot be categorized neither in interference nor developmental errors. Interference is the result of old habits of first language, and it must be unlearned before the learning of the new habit of second language is concerned. Learner of second language tend to transfer the form, meaning, and culture of their first language to foreign language and culture when attempting to speak the language itself. By learning second language habits, first language habits are also transferred, and then the errors occur. Slinker, for example, points out that there are two types of transfer in learning a second language. which is positive and negative transfer. In positive transfer, first language facilitates the acquisition of second language, but in negative transfer, the first language has negative impacts on second language and interferes in first language. Casper et al. Argued that transfer is a mental and communicative process through which second language learners develop their interlanguage skills. Interlanguage, a language, or you can say the specific grammatical system of the individual, where certain grammatical features of the first language and certain of the targeted language are acquired, and it is kind of a middle grammar that they construct. So learners develop their interlanguage skills by activating and using their previous linguistic knowledge. Two paths for second language acquisition suggested by Lennerberg is firstly normal language learning, which occurs in childhood. Secondly, reaching the age of puberty. In this stage, brain loses its elasticity and reorganizational capacities, which are necessary for language acquisition. At an early stage in childhood, human can learn languages. If it is not done, it will reduce by the stage of puberty. In childhood, the left hemisphere is more involved in speech and language than the right hemisphere. After that, in stage of puberty, the two hemispheres become quite specialized for function because the children have ability in transferring and recalling the vocabulary of the first language. This is primarily the disadvantage for them in learning a language without interference from their first language. In second language writing, transfer can be considered both as a learning device and as a strategy to solve communication problems. Language learner may use the first language strategies in their second language writing because of similarities in first language and second language. If the learner's knowledge of the target language is not enough, the learner relies on her or his first language to express his or her ideas, and this reliance can be positive as well as negative. To conclude, first language has an effect on the second language acquisition. Further, interference can be positive or negative, depends on similarities and differences between the two languages.